Russian girl flirts with lazy young man, but he pretends not to get anything. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. At a typical high school in Japan, a girl catches everyone's attention wherever she goes. Her name is Alisa Kujo, but everyone calls her Alya. With a Russian father, Alya not only has the highest grades in school, but also excels in sports. She is also the treasurer of the student council. All these qualities make Alya one of the most sought-after girls among her peers. One of those who couldn't resist her charm was Ando, a second-year student. Acting cool as always, he introduced himself and asked her out for lunch, but she declined without a second thought. To save some face, he asked if he could at least get her phone number, but she said no because she had no interest in him whatsoever. After humiliating the boy, to close the deal, she remarked that his necklace was against the school rules, living up to her role in the student council. After this little spectacle, people around were left wondering how this girl could reject the most desired guy in school so effortlessly. When Alya arrived in the classroom, she encountered the same interested looks from the boys she passed. Sitting at the back of the room, she greeted her friend Q's with a good morning, but he didn't wake up. So she kicked his chair and asked if he stayed up late watching anime again. He confessed that he was up until dawn debating with an otaku friend about the latest episode they watched. Acting all proper, Alya scolded him, saying he was an idiot for sacrificing his sleep for cartoons, leaving him tired and sleepy at school the next day. If being an idiot means professing your love for a work of art without being bound by time, then Q's accepted the insult gladly. Regardless, the boy couldn't help but yawn from exhaustion, and in one of those yawns Alya said something in Russian to him. Q's asked what she said, and she explained that she called him pathetic. Not paying much attention, Q's noticed it was time for chemistry class, but since he didn't bring his materials, he asked to share with his friend. However, his sudden interest started fading as the teacher wrote words like estrogen, tungsten, and oxygen on the board. To prevent her friend from falling asleep again, Alya poked him in the ribs with a pen, making him impulsively raise his hand. The problem was that the teacher had just asked what the second most abundant chemical element in the universe was, leaving Q's in a tight spot. To help him out, Alya discreetly pointed to one of the elements on the periodic table, so Q's answered strontium. Disappointed, the teacher said the answer was wrong, and then asked Alya next. Cynically, she answered helium, which was correct, leaving Q's shocked at how terribly he had been tricked. After the embarrassment, Q's confronted her about the prank, but she pretended she had pointed to the right element. As he grew more agitated, she said something else in Russian. Once again, he asked what she had said, and she told him she called him an idiot. However, one thing Alya didn't know was that Q's understood Russian and that she had actually called him cute. When he was a child, he used to play with a Russian girl who lived near his grandfather's house, so he ended up learning quite a bit of the language back then. Curiously, it was the same language his wonderful Russian friend was using to flirt with him secretly. But to avoid embarrassing her and lacking the courage, Q's decided to keep it a secret. Sometime later, Q's decided to take out his phone, and the enforcer of useless matters reprimanded him, saying that phones were prohibited on school grounds unless it was an emergency. Q's replied that it was an emergency because a game was giving away a legendary character for free, but only for those who claimed it within 10 minutes. Alya confiscated his phone and saw that he had gotten Tsukuyomi, the moon goddess in Japanese mythology. The council member asked why Tsukuyomi had silver hair instead of black, but Q's didn't care about the hair color as long as the goddess remained beautiful. Hearing this, Alya felt a tinge of jealousy and returned his phone. She then said in Russian that she also had silver hair. Embarrassed, Q's asked what she said, and Alya claimed she called him an addict. Q's replied that he had to be an addict to compete because he was part of the lower ranks and had to earn his equipment through blood and sweat, unlike the rich kids who could have their parents buy them platinum armor. Fed up, Alya complained that she thought he was more serious than that, and Q's reflected internally that none of what he said was a joke. Later during lunch, Takeshi, one of Q's friends, was once again upset about not being popular with the girls. Paying little attention to his outburst, the boys at the table saw the student council members including Alya and her sister Maria, who was the council secretary, as well as Yuki, the spokesperson. The boys at Q's table commented on how beautiful these girls were, although Alya supposedly already had a boyfriend according to what she had said. Q's teased that even if she didn't take, she wouldn't stand a chance, so she admitted he was jealous because the guy was close enough to that goddess to call her by her nickname. Indifferently, Q's admitted it was true, but noted that the girl was always nagging him, though Takshi thought that was better than being ignored, especially since Alya barely spoke to anyone else. This was why he preferred Suwoo, because she was much more open and communicative than Alya. The problem was that Suwoo rejected many students. While listening to this, Q's glanced at the girl, who looked back at him with a red face. Soon she approached and asked to sit at the table with Alya. When the two sat down, Suwoo was much more communicative as always, while her colleague maintained her usual stern expression. During lunch, Q's and the council spokesperson seemed to be getting along very well, making Alya feel that familiar jealousy. She asked if the two were friends. Suwoo explained that they had known each other since childhood and had studied together from preschool until now. Then the other two boys finished eating and went to return their trays, so Suwoo moved closer to Q's and asked if he had considered her offer to join the student council. However, as he said so many times before, the guy has no interest in this, so the girl insists he would be a great fit with her and Alya, especially since he has experience as vice president. Alya is surprised by this information, so Suwoo explains that Q's was her vice when they were in elementary school. Q's is quick to remind everyone that he only ran because the girl pestered him a lot as she needed a vice. With that said, Suwoo argues to her colleague that this guy knows how to get things done, and she responds in Russian that she knows this very well while finishing her can of Oshiruko. On the way out of school, Suwoo says goodbye to the two, and Alya takes the opportunity to express her surprise at seeing Q's talking like that with the girl, as she thought he had no friends. Q's then points his finger at Alya, implying that she is his friend. Questioning if they indeed are, Alya concludes they are after thinking for a bit, then leaves abruptly, saying she has matters to attend to in the student council room, leaving Q's there. Next, we see a childhood memory of Q's where he played with the Russian girl who lived near his grandfather. Speaking in Russian, they admired the sunset together, and the girl corrected his words or completed his sentences when he didn't know what to say. When the sun sets, the girl bids young Q's farewell and gives him a tender kiss on the cheek. Q's wakes up at this moment, remembering that he studied Russian like crazy just to talk to this girl, but nowadays he doesn't even remember her name. The next day, as was common in this school, Q's and Alya were responsible for organizing the classroom before the first class. As he woke up very early because of the dream, he went to school way ahead of time to get things in order, so there was nothing left to do when his task partner arrived. Alya thinks it's going to rain because she's never seen this guy care so much about organization until Q's notices a stain on her sock. She explains that a truck splashed water on her and that it was also her fault for walking so close to the street. But anyway, she brought another pair of socks, so it's all good. Changing the subject, Alya also asks if Q's really isn't interested in joining the student council since he was a vice once. Not interested, Q's repeats that he doesn't want to, so Alya drops the subject and removes the dirty sock, making Q's turn away in embarrassment. From the smile the girl gives, it seems that was her intention. The next step of her plan was to cross her legs and ask the boy to fetch her spare sock from the locker, as she had already removed the dirty one and now couldn't step on the floor. With little patience, he agrees and fetches the sock, and the girl asks him to put it on her. This time he couldn't help but question what was going on, so she explains that it's a reward for getting the sock, and then she says in Russian that it's also a reward for herself. After yet another sudden confession from the girl in another language, Q's begins to wonder about her intentions with this kind of thing. Maybe she's tired of acting perfect for the whole school and uses him as a release valve. Anyway, as the girl pretended to call him a coward in Russian, he holds her foot and starts putting the sock on. Even after all her bravado, Alya backs down and says she's not ready for this, but Q's goes through with it for being called a coward. The problem is in the middle of it, he accidentally touches a place he shouldn't, so Alya kicks him in the face, leaving the warrior defeated and left to die alone at the back of the classroom. Hours later, the boy rises from the ashes to apologize, and Alya calls him leg pervert in Russian. However, she also apologizes for kicking him and tries to touch him to see if he's okay, but the boy loses it and ends up blurting that he should be thankful for the beautiful view granted to him during the kick. Immediately, Alya punches the young man and curses his family to the 5th generation in Russian, then runs off. To try to fix this mess, Kyu's chases after the girl throughout the school, but her physical education skills keep her at a distance. Furthermore, already in the courtyard, she jumps over the side rail of the corridor, leaving the guy eating her dust. 10 minutes later, the two are panting after the marathon they ran. Regaining his breath, Kyu's apologizes again and Alya acknowledges that she was partly to blame. To make up for it, the boy gives the girl a can of oshiruko, a drink she loves. Even though she makes a fuss initially, she ends up accepting it, and after taking a sip, she offers him some in Russian. Kyu's goes crazy at the possibility of an indirect kiss happening, but not wanting to reveal that he understands the language, he plays dumb once more. Alya teases him by saying in Russian that the guy doesn't understand anything she says, causing Kyu's to lose his composure completely. The day after, Kyu's shows up to help with something Suwoo asked for, so he arrives asking what it's about. Suwoo scolds him for his lack of manners, saying the right thing to do would be to ask if she's been waiting long. He then sarcastically acts out what she requested, making Suwoo play along. Watching this with a sour expression, Alya comments that the two really do get along well, which embarrasses Kyu's. Gradually losing the joy in his eyes, Kyu's learns that he came to help organize the storage room. After some time, Suwoo asks him to fetch some board games from a higher shelf because apparently she doesn't know how to climb a ladder. Once he does, she explains that she uses these games for school festivals and also played them during the new student council meeting the other day. To make conversation, Kyu's asks who won and Suwoo responds that he's looking at the winner. Next to them, Alya asks for less chatter and more work. When Suwoo goes to do something in another corner, Alya repeatedly says in Russian that she wants attention, leaving Kyu's unsure how to react. After the storage room is organized, the students are surprised by the approach of Kanzaki, the student council president. Kanzaki comments that he's heard a lot about how talented Kyu's is, and the boy thanks him for the praise. At the same time, Kyu's observes that this guy really has a certain style, which must be why he's the school's superstar president. Whatever the case, he has nothing to do with it, so he bids farewell. But before he leaves, Kanzaki offers to pay for his dinner as a thank you for cleaning the storage room. Kyu's politely declines, but Suwoo insists because Kyu's won't have a ready dinner when he gets home. Kanzaki asks how she knows this about his life, and she reveals that they've been friends since childhood. Therefore, the president also invites the two girls. Later, after placing their orders, the four of them start a conversation. Suwoo highlights how amazing Kyu's is for handling physical work and paperwork like they're nothing, in addition to being a great master of ceremonies and negotiator. Kanzaki knows she doesn't usually speak so highly of others, so this guy must really have potential. With this in mind, the president invites Kyu's to join the student council, but for the 1000th time, the boy refuses, saying what he did in middle school was enough. Now he's tired of that kind of thing. Kanzaki agrees that the council involves a lot of work, but the reward is worth it. Being honest, he emphasizes that Kyu's participation in the council will have a huge impact on his job recommendations. Kyu's replies that he's not very ambitious, but Suwoo insists they should run together again. Kyu's argues that the girl will win the presidency with or without him, but she insists on having him by her side on this journey. Once again, he declines the invitation, this time with less patience. Kanzaki says that perhaps Suwoo isn't the best candidate considering that Alya is also running. When the Russian girl confirms this, Suwoo narrows her eyes in a challenging manner. Soon, everyone's food arrives. After the meal, they all say their goodbyes, and Kanzaki says he will go with Suwoo in one direction and asks Kyu's to walk Alya home. The Russian girl refuses the company, but the boy doesn't want to leave her alone on the street at night. Along the way, he asks if she's really running for student council president, and she confirms it again without much patience. She then says she can walk the rest of the way alone and thanks him for his company. Upon reaching his doorstep, Kyu's notices women's shoes at the entrance and then sees a girl on the sofa reading a book. He asks what she's doing there. While talking about the book she's reading, she informs him that she'll be sleeping there tonight, even though the homeowner hadn't been informed. In the novel she's reading, she complains that the protagonist doesn't realize he's an older brother to one of the characters, and Kyu's finds it ironic that this girl is saying that as she pretends to everyone that she's his childhood friend. Surprised, Suwoo turns and asks if that's not true, since she and her brother have known each other forever and are close, so it makes sense. She then confirms that the older guy with the character is her brother. brother. Kyu's considers that maybe they're half-siblings or something like that, so Suwoo grabs him by the collar and responds that the story is only good because they're blood siblings. The next day, Suwoo wakes her brother up by annoying him, so he threatens to report her for domestic violence. With no other options, the girl promises to hide under his bed to pull his feet. Fed up, Kyu's tells his sister to get down, and she asks if it's because he'll end up with a tent pitched if she doesn't leave. Later, they watch a movie together called Space Girl Chiai, and Suwoo gets emotional seeing exclusive relationship scenes that never appeared on TV. Because of this, she wants to watch the movie again right then, but Kyu's brings her back to reality, reminding her they need to do some shopping. In a clothing store, Suwoo would love to buy a summer dress, but prefers to declare bankruptcy buying anime items. Kyu's finds it absurd that the fabric costs 15,000 yen, and the girl explains that women's fashion charges by the centimeter of fabric. Changing the subject, her brother comments that maybe a silver thing is spying on them, while Alya watches their interaction with a hateful expression. Suwoo says she noticed it long before, ever since they arrived on that floor, because she has a sixth sense for detecting the gazes of people she knows. Kyu's asks if she isn't ashamed to say something so ridiculous with such confidence, and she admits that she is, but without breaking character. Kyu's then wonders how he can resolve this until he looks back and sees his sister heading directly toward Alya. With no place to hide, the Russian girl pretends she stumbled upon them by chance at the mall, and they both pretend to believe her. She explains that she came to buy some clothes, so Suwoo invites her to join them for lunch. Kyu's is worried about taking her to that restaurant, and his sister remarks that he was eager for this to happen, surprising Alya. The Russian girl asks what's wrong with the restaurant, so Suwoo asks if she likes spicy food because that's the house specialty. Kyu's is more honest with his friend and warns her that the food there burns hotter than hell in summer without a fan, but Alya decides to go without hesitation. Upon arrival, and not for lack of warning, the restaurant's name is Hell's Cauldron, causing Alya's eyes to widen. Suwoo dismisses it as just a little spice, making the Russian girl frown, and Kyu's tries one last time to warn her that all hope should be abandoned if she decides to open the gates of hell. Regardless, Alya stands firm and doesn't back down. Once seated, she can't understand anything on the menu, so Suwoo explains that Blood Pool Hell is a ramen with a very red soup, the least spicy on the menu. Thorny Valley Hell makes it feel like your tongue is being dipped in acid. Alya asks about Infinite Hell, and Suwoo says she'd rather sleep in a dragon's stomach. Kyu's opts for the mildest dish because he doesn't want to experiment in an unfamiliar restaurant, and the two women follow suit. After placing their order, Alya comments on Suwoo's masculine outfit, and she explains that she's taking advantage of her day off to break her routine. To make things even more awkward, Suwoo mentions that she was in bed with Kyu's this morning, causing him to spit out his water and attract stares from the restaurant. His sister adds that she felt like wearing something different today, so she borrowed a shirt from him. On the verge of passing out, Alya asks Kyu's what that's all about, and he explains that this girl showed up at his house unannounced, entered his room, and jumped on his bed. To cool things down, the waiter brings a volcano in the form of food to the table, and Alya threatens to cancel, but swallows her fear and a bit of that noodle. Her soul is instantly cremated, but she pretends everything is fine when Kyu's asks. With that, the siblings enjoy the food and praise its quality until Alya starts tearing up and asking someone to kill her in Russian. Kyu's tells her she doesn't need to push herself, but she lies, saying it's great. Noticing the conversation, Suwoo takes the opportunity to offer Demon's Tear to spice up her dish further. Kyu's sees the malicious glint in his sister's eyes and realizes she's doing it on purpose, so he asks Alya not to add that spice, but she thinks a single drop won't make a difference. As soon as she tries the food with the extra heat, she wakes up in a park, not knowing how she got there. Kyu's informs her that Suwoo went to buy something and offers her an ice cream to soothe her. In the midst of this, he asks why she wants to be president, and she responds that she doesn't need a reason to aim for something big. She just wants it even though she doesn't have a running mate. Kyu's explains that she can only run with a vice president, so Alya decides to find someone to be her vice just on paper. In Russian, she confides that she wishes Q's would stand by her in this process, which touches him. This statement makes him recall an old moment when a girl was crying and apologizing to her parents behind a stage curtain. Distracted, the boy is invited to accompany Alya to a clothing store, but he thinks it requires more intimacy to advise a woman on what to wear. Internally, he reflects that Alya doesn't quite understand how friendships work, and understanding her perspective, he agrees to accompany her, making it clear that they are friends. At the store, Alya wonders why Q's suddenly started being nice to her and concludes that he feels sorry for her, thinking she has no chance of being elected president. Convinced of this, she angrily says she'll change and promises to show who's boss with her fashion show. Worried about the chance of him hearing her change, she tells him to leave, which he does. Feeling more secure, she puts on the dress she picked out and likes the result. Before leaving the changing room, she's afraid he won't react, but pushes that aside and shows off her outfit. People around praise the girl's beauty, and Q's comments that the dress highlights Alya's elegance and femininity, making her even more beautiful than she already is. Disbelieving what she just heard, she closes the curtain and freaks out over being praised more than she expected, while Q's is also unsure of what he said outside. Noticing the boy's talent for compliments, the Russian girl thinks he must have practiced with Siwoo, so she puts on a more masculine outfit to compete with her. Once again, Q's praises her with his excellent rhetoric, leaving her even more flustered. Addicted to receiving compliments, she tries on the entire store for her friend to see. For the grand finale, she puts on the most daring outfit she's worn so far, but when she opens the curtain, Siwoo is next to Q's, so she closes the curtain and says something in Russian. Siwoo asks what she said, and Q's explains that she seems to want to die, so his sister mocks the Russian girl. Taking the subway home, the siblings say goodbye, leaving Alya alone with her embarrassed thoughts. Putting that aside, she wonders why the two got off at the same station. When she gets home, the Russian girl is greeted warmly by her older sister Masha. Alya reveals that she met Q's and his childhood friend, prompting Masha to comment that her sister always gets irritated when it comes to that boy. She understands that Alya has finally found someone who truly moved her heart. Alya doesn't like this comment and downplays it, arguing that she doesn't see the boy that way. Many years ago in Vladivostok, Russia, the teacher asks the students to form groups and write about local shops, with the best group winning a prize. Excited, the children begin forming teams, and Alya's classmates decide to write about the clothing store and the bakery, leaving her to handle the butcher shop and the florist. Being competitive, Alya wants to come in first. When she arrives at the florist, she tells the owner that she is doing a school project and needs to study his shop. Later, she stops by the butcher shop and does the same. The next day, when presenting what she did to her friends, none of them had done anything, so Alya scolds the boys, saying that such a report is lengthy. However, since they have a week's deadline, her classmates believe they have plenty of time. Frustrated, Alya insists it won't be enough time. The boys take her notebook and see that she is taking the project very seriously. The other girl in the group anxiously asks if they have to read all of it, which makes Alya even angrier. The whole group starts arguing over this, and the teacher has to intervene. Staying late at school, Alya refuses to give in and continues to focus on her work, further developing her notes. A week later, when the results are announced, Group B emerges victorious, leaving Alya devastated despite all her effort. Returning home that day, she reflects that she would have won if only her group members had been as serious as she was. At the same time, she concludes that she shouldn't expect much from others, since she feels no one is as motivated as she is. With teary eyes, she decides that if that's the case, she'll do everything on her own. Years later in Japan, her new classmates ask if she passed that super difficult transfer exam, and she proudly says yes. The students ask how she speaks Japanese so well, and she explains that she lived in the country 5 years ago. When the bell rings and class begins, Alya looks over and sees a boy who slept through all the noise, so she wakes him to let him know the bell rang. Lazily, Q's asks if she is the girl who gave the speech at the opening ceremony, so she formally introduces herself enthusiastically. Q's also says his name, but without much grace. Stretching, he's happy to see that Hikaru is in the same class as him, and even happier to find that Takeshi is there too. In science class, Q's forgets his notebook at home and shares with a friend. During physical education, he runs as if he's carrying lead weights in his underwear. In math class, the only counting he does is of sheep while he dreams. costumes. Seeing all this, Alya realizes that even the most prestigious schools have their share of lazy students. Later, with 14 days until the school festival, it was decided that the theme would be Haunted House. Hikaru and Takeshi rack their brains trying to figure out how to get costumes for the ghosts while Alya sews some in her corner. After the last bell rings, some classmates tell her it's time to go home, but the Russian girl wants to stay late, dedicating herself to the task. After they leave, Alya overhears the girls commenting that it's just a festival and shouldn't be taken so seriously. This makes her feel like the present is repeating the past from the days when she would get indignant in the cloudy streets of Russia. Lost in her memories, she pricks her finger and watches the blood ooze out. Nevertheless, she doesn't intend to give up, even if it means being alone. Suddenly, Q's arrives in the room looking for her and asks her to go home because he got a document showing that the Handicrafts Club offered to help with the festival costumes after he had the former student council president pull some strings. Therefore, Alya no longer needs to work on them as everything is already arranged, and there's no need for her to do it all alone. Annoyed, she responds that she just wants the festival to be good. As she speaks, she starts to cry and get more agitated, claiming that people don't pay as much attention to these things as she does. Finally, she asks if she's doing something wrong, to which Q's replies that she's putting effort into the wrong things because school activities aren't meant to be done alone, but rather to foster a sense of teamwork among students to create something together. Not knowing what to say, Alya packs up her things and leaves. Hurrying through the corridors, she wonders what that boy has in his head. The next day, Takeshi presents his pre-festival project, an event just for them that will include a hide-and-seek game and a courage test in the school premises. With 6 days left until the event, everyone works together to build every detail, and Alya gets excited when she receives her well-made ghost costume, even starting to socialize with her classmates more casually. Soon, the big day of the Serai Autumn Festival arrives, and all the participants take their positions to give their best after so much effort in setting everything up. After the event, their class wins the prize for the best attraction at the festival, and at night, the students gather for the post-festival folk dance. Alya sees Q's and asks to sit next to him, so he assumes she doesn't know how to dance since she decided to sit there instead of participating, considering any boy would love to dance with her. With a serious expression, she mentions that she practiced ballet as a child, so this easy dance wouldn't be a problem for her. However, she refused to dance with all the guys because she didn't want to bother. Q's comments that it must be tough to reject so many people, but she notes that she's used to it. That's when the boy understands why they call Alya the Ice Princess. The girl is bothered by the nickname, but only the princess part, as it makes her seem like one of those snobby privileged kids. Of course, she was born with above average looks and talent according to herself, but she couldn't survive on just that. Looking at the bandages on her fingers, she confesses that it irritates her when her effort is ignored, and people only value other things. Given this, Q's proposes asking everyone not to call her that anymore, and the girl thanks him. In the end, she acknowledges that she would never have experienced the school festival this way if she had done everything alone, and, taking advantage of the moment, apologizes for getting mad at Q's that day. Q's didn't see it as a big deal, especially since Alya put in much more effort than he did, for example, but the girl insists on making it up to him somehow. So, he asks if there's a Russian custom where people give each other special nicknames. Until then, he had only called the Russian girl by her last name, Kujo. When she responded that her family calls her Alya, he asks to call her that as a reward. Alya asks what he gains from that, and he claims he'll be the only one to call the prettiest girl in school by her nickname. Speaking of which, a few boys appear to invite the Ice Princess to the dance, leaving her embarrassed with so many people insisting. Seeing his new friend in trouble, Q's pulls Alya away and tells the others that this girl is already taken. As Q's pulls her toward the dance, the girl feels her heart about to explode, and since she said a simple dance like this would be easy, the boy asks her to show if she was serious. The next day, as usual, Alya looks at her friend sleeping in class with a disdainful expression. When he wakes up, She tells him he's a waste of space. In Russian, she says that just because he was nice to her last night doesn't mean things will change. After Alya tells the whole story, Masha is happy with a love story between the two, which irritates the older sister because one thing has nothing to do with the other. To the older sister, it's clearly a love story like in the movies, where a friendship grows into a romance. Looking at the pendant she got from Sa, her boyfriend, Masha claims it was the same for her, especially when the boy saved her from a dog attack. Nervous, Alya tells the girl to brag about her love life elsewhere. The next day, in the student council room, Kyu's is greeted by the council president, Kanzaki, as he was called to help Yuki. At that moment, a girl introduces herself as Alisa Kujo, Alya's older sister and student council secretary. However, she prefers to be called Masha because a friend of her sister is also a friend of hers. Saying this, she holds the boy's hand and says it's a pleasure to meet him. In that gesture, she feels something different in her heart and asks Kyu's given name. He responds that it's Masachika, which means together with diplomacy. The girl snaps out of it and apologizes for her behavior, then invites the boy to join her. But in Russian, although he understood, he keeps pretending not to. So Masha repeats the request in Japanese. Later, in a gift shop, Masha falls in love with a plush cat that looks like Alya. According to her, Kyu's looks disgusted, but the girl believes it's a great idea to buy plushies that resemble each student council member. Kyu's agrees that the girls will love it, but wonders how the president would look among those toys. Ignoring his opinion, Masha begins her search for a plushie that looks like Kanzaki. Kyu's tries to stop her, but gives in when she shows him a lion with glasses that looks exactly like the president. Despite this, he insists it's not a good idea to buy those things. So Masha gives up, but decides to take the first kitten she saw anyway. Worried, Kyu's asks her not to put that toy on the same receipt or her sister, the treasurer, will get annoyed. Leaving the store, the boy notices Alya's sister's oddity and wonders if she's always like that. If so, it explains why Alya also seems a bit off. Sometime later, Masha arrives at the tea shop and gives her sister in plush form to the boy, who doesn't know how to react. According to her, the two look great together, so much so that she decides to take a picture of this unique moment. But Kyu's stops her by placing a bag in front of the camera. Inside the tea shop, Masha asks Kyu's opinion on a product, but he warns he knows nothing about it. Internally, he reflects that his sister, Yuki, could help a lot with this since their mother taught her a lot about it. Remembering their childhood, when their parents separated, Kyu's decided to live with his father. But Yuki, who was ill, stayed with their mother. Seeing the boy was distressed, Masha gives him a caring hug, making Kyu's feel something different inside, until the tea she was holding burns the boy's back. In shock, Masha drops the cup while the Alya plushie seems to observe the scene. Later, upon arriving at the student council room, Masha shows the new mascot to the president. Kanzaki admits that the creature is cute but hopes the girl doesn't plan to keep it there. Kyu's places the supplies they bought on the table and Kanzaki thanks him as he couldn't imagine what it would be like if the older Kujo had gone shopping alone. Inside, Kyu's knows well that the council would turn into a theme park created by a 6-year-old. Speaking of which, the president pats Kyu's on the shoulder and asks if he's changed his mind about joining the council, but he remains firm in his decision, although he doesn't mind lending a hand occasionally. Masha suggests he join in name only and Kyu's understands the girl wants him to join, but he doesn't get why the president is so determined to convince him. Kanzaki turns the question around, wanting to know why Kyu's is so determined not to participate. In fact, Kanzaki believes there's a reason behind this beyond the workload involved. Kyu's explains that he doesn't feel worthy of being a student council representative, but the president disagrees, reminding him that he was an excellent vice president in middle school. Still, it was precisely this experience that proved to Kyu's that he isn't suited for such a position, as he felt he had no relevant goal to achieve in that role. In response, Kanzaki confesses that he became president just to win the heart of the girl he liked, a much more trivial reason than any other. Remembering this, the young man can't help but burst into laughter, while Kyu's asks if he's serious. To prove his point, Kanzaki shows a photo of a beaten and unconfident boy, which Kyu's thinks is the younger brother of the young man. However, it was Kanzaki himself in the last year of middle school just 2 years ago. His grades were bad, and he hated sports even more so school in general, until one day he fell in love with one of the prettiest girls in the class, who is now his current girlfriend Sarashina Chisaki, the vice president. That's why he doesn't believe Q's needs a proper reason, especially since Masha only joined because Chisaki asked her to. Masha believes it doesn't matter why you join the council, but what you do during your time there. It doesn't matter if it was for love or friendship, as long as you care about making things better for other students. Otherwise, only saints could hold positions of power. That said, Kanzaki reminds Q's that he has already shown results as vice president once in his life, and that alone is proof that he has nothing to be ashamed of. This comment brings Q's back to the memory of the election he participated in when he was younger. His sister asked him to stay by her side no matter what, but he thought it would be too much trouble. Anyway, Kanzaki states that Q's could join the council to elect someone else as president, as this is perfectly acceptable and everyone will welcome him with open arms. Faced with this, Q's says he'll think about it, and Kanzaki notes that having time to think is the great privilege of youth. Masha reminds them that the president is not an old man, even though he seems older than he really is, and Kanzaki admits he's heard that many times. Recently, he was mistaken for a graduate student. Reflecting briefly on the proposal, Q's asks where Alya is, and Kanzaki explains that she's mediating a discussion between the baseball and soccer teams, as the baseball team has inter-school games every year around this time and uses the field to prepare, but the soccer team made it to the regional qualifiers this year and also needs the field. Neither team wants to give in, especially since the baseball team is visited by scouts who recruit players to go pro, and the team captain has even been featured on TV and is seen as a big promise in the sport. Usually Chisaki mediates between the clubs, but she's busy with important matters in the kendo club. That's why Kanzaki sent Alya to gain experience, although it seems she's having trouble. Hearing this, Q's excuses himself and leaves the council room to see if there's any trouble between the teams. Meanwhile, in the locker room, Alya is sweating bullets in the midst of a bunch of men with fire in their eyes. Trying to control everyone's anger, she emphasizes that belittling others won't solve the situation. The soccer goalie asks if she has a better idea, so she suggests they use the nearby Riverside Park to train, as it has both baseball and soccer fields. However, the school's field is in much better condition, so no one wants to give it up. This fact reignites the argument, and Alya tries to be heard once more, but is drowned out by the boys shouting. Faced with this, she feels like a failure who can't influence people. This reminds her of when she was younger, when she decided she wouldn't trust people anymore, only to regret it later. That day, she resolved to do everything alone because no one could keep up with her pace. Now she pays the price for having isolated herself and scorned interaction with others. Absolutely no one pays attention to her for this reason, as Alya has always been seen as someone who dictated right and wrong with her nose in the air, as if she were the owner of the truth. Thinking about it, Alya concludes that she is completely alone, and this feeling brings tears to her eyes, especially since she is sure it's her own fault. In Russian, she quietly asks for help, as if someone could somehow hear her. Suddenly, Q's awkwardly enters the locker room and apologizes for interrupting, then announces that he is responsible for general matters of the student council and has been sent as reinforcement for the mediation. Moments earlier, Q's had been listening to the argument and how Alya was trying to calm everyone down, and he realized that her approach wouldn't work because both sides were too heated, so it would be good for the council to buy some time to start over. Despite this, Q's believes it's a good experience for the girl and turns to leave until he hears her asking for help in Russian. Before entering the locker room, he thinks that this is why Alya is always alone, because she only says important things in a language no one understands. When the boy gets into trouble, one of the baseball players recognizes him as the one who was vice president during elementary school. Q's arrives with a bang and emphasizes that the big question is who gets the school field and who goes to the river. He suggests that the baseball team take the river as they have fewer players to move. In exchange, the soccer team, which has more people, will send some to help with the process. Still, the soccer players don't want to cooperate cooperate, and the baseball team won't budge either. So the soccer assistants offer to help with the relocation, calming everyone's nerves. With the terms agreed upon between both parties, the matter is officially resolved. Therefore, Kyu's asks the captain from each side to attend the student council with their formal requests. Later, when returning to the council, Kyu's apologizes to Alya for thinking he might have run over her in the middle of the discussion. She didn't see anything wrong, but wanted to know why the boy made that proposal, because it seemed like he knew the assistant would offer help. Moreover, Kyu's was staring at the assistant the whole time during the discussion. He explains that the girl is dating the captain of the baseball team, and as the team leader he had to stick to his convictions even if he wanted to help his girlfriend. What Kyu's did was give the girl a little nudge by looking directly at her and instigating a decision from her, considering that as the baseball captain's girlfriend she wouldn't feel out of place helping. On their way, Kanzaki approaches the two and asks if the case was settled. Upon confirmation, the president thanks the youngest Kujo for her help, making Kyu's imagine that it was all planned to make him intervene in the mediation on purpose. Having no reason to lie, Kanzaki admits that was the plan and asks if Kyu's has made up his mind. Finally, the boy changes his mind and makes himself available. Happy, Kanzaki calls the new member to the council room. At night on the way home, Kyu's confesses that he doesn't like the feeling of being tricked, but believes it's time to accept his fate because all his actions pushed him toward the student council. Speaking of which, since it was late, Kanzaki left the form for the boy to fill out and deliver tomorrow. Alya asks if Kyu's will join the presidential election with Suwoo, because even if it's true, she won't give up on becoming president, even if it means facing both of them. Remembering how the Russian girl is, Kyu's knows well that she won't give up because she sees Alya as an unwavering force. Given this, he states that he will make her president because he doesn't want Alya to be alone anymore. Therefore, from now on they are on the same side. Saying this, he extends his hand and Alya wipes her tears and reciprocates the gesture. Then she surprises Kyu's with a phrase in Russian that makes his heart race. When he was a child playing with his Russian friend, he felt the same thing, and now he discovers he can feel it again. Suddenly, Alya crushes his hand's bones and asks if he was thinking about another girl. Kyu's confesses in shock and soon realizes he committed the second biggest mistake a romantic comedy protagonist could make in a confession. The first is to repeat the same confession. Alya assumes the boy was thinking about Yuki Suwoo, but before he can deny it, he gets another tight squeeze on his hand. Finally, she slaps his face in exchange for forgiving him for the mistake. Kyu's falls to the ground and praises the girl's strength. Then she extends her hand to help him up. Near home, he confesses that it's the first time he's been slapped by a girl and believes it gave him XP as a man. In response, Alya comments that the boy must have hit his head on the ground in the fall unless he has a defective brain from the factory, and Kyu's finds it ironic to hear that considering he was considered a child prodigy. Disbelieving, Alya gives an ironic laugh. At the building's door, the Russian girl asks if the guy wants ice to put on his face, but he says he's fine since he doesn't feel anything on the left side of his face. Then Alya kisses the right side and says goodbye. When she goes up to her room, Alya panics, remembering that she said she loves Kyu's in Russian, so she starts denying to herself that she indeed feels that way about him, pretending she just got carried away by the heat of the moment. Even if she's in love, hypothetically speaking, her priority is to be elected president of the student council, and that's what she should focus on right now, nothing else.
However, Alya can't stop imagining tomorrow when she returns to school and Kyu's says he didn't mean it when he said they were on the same side.
At that moment, her older sister arrives and says she met a wonderful person. Then she shows a stuffed kitten and says it looks like her sister, although Alya doesn't think so. Later, Masha comments that Kyu's is a great guy and understands why her sister fell in love with him. Although Alya denies it, her sister warns that she needs to confess her feelings to him as soon as possible because any day she might end up losing the one she loves to someone else. At the same time, Kyu's Masachika was having that internal debate everyone has when they think they've said something stupid or cheesy in front of someone they want to impress. At least he was sure Alya had said she loved him, which might mean the things she said in Russian weren't just jokes. She even seemed very serious when she said it today, but still Kyu's couldn't believe that girl could love him. With his low self-esteem, the student preferred to think that Alya got carried away by the moment and acted on impulse. In his mind, Alya was probably screaming into her pillow out of embarrassment and regret. After all, having grown up watching his parents fight, Kyu's saw love as a fragile and unreliable feeling, sometimes even a waste of time. Despite saying he would stay by Alya's side, the boy still felt guilty for having once run away from his sister, leaving her to carry the Suwoo family name alone. When he got home, he saw Yuki's shoes at the entrance, even though she had said she would be out. The first thing he did was go to the bathroom where the girl had left the door open and was caught undressed. Although Yuki screamed and called her brother a pervert, he found it more likely that she had planned this because being naked with the door unlocked is not a smart way to preserve one's privacy. To make matters worse, Yuki confessed she did it on purpose because they had never had this scene together before where the brother walks in on the sister while she is dressing, and she said every pair of siblings should go through this at least once in their lives. Kyu's responded that this only made sense in her crazy otaku brain, but Yuki was determined to carry out her scene to the end, even looking at an imaginary camera to take that fan service photo. Kyu's questioned what she was doing, and she said she was looking at a camera that only idiots couldn't see, so he grumbled again. Ignoring him, Yuki said this was her reward for fooling her brother earlier, but Kyu's warned he didn't want to be rewarded by seeing her as she came into the world. Yuki insisted that her brother had taken a secret peek, so Kyu's taught that looking at everything at once wasn't fun, but that the true master should sneak a glance. After the initial shock of hearing such an atrocity, Yuki regained her composure and agreed that was the trick, but she made sure to know if he had taken a look. Cornered, Kyu's admitted he had observed the heart region starting the second round of their fight. Later in Kyu's room, Yuki asked if her brother had finally decided to join the council, and he admitted he had, but that he would support Alya for president. This statement distressed Yuki, making her feel she was losing her brother to the Russian girl, and she couldn't understand why she couldn't keep her brother entertained with her own assets, or maybe the Russian girl had some special charm she didn't know about. Tired, Kyu's asked his sister to be a bit less graphic in her description, but she wouldn't stop teasing him. First, she questioned if he wanted to be the first to honk his sister's horn, but remembered that had already happened in elementary school. Remembering this, Yuki lost all humor and assumed a tense expression, recalling a day they collided during a game of tag and Kyu's accidentally touched something he shouldn't have. Kyu's marveled that he hadn't knocked the wind out of his sister in the collision, considering she had asthma, and the girl certainly agreed, although today she felt healthy enough not to catch even a cold. Kyu's remembered his sister was quieter back then, causing Yuki to completely freak out, telling him to pamper her instead of judging what she did or didn't do when she was younger. She handed him her hairbrush, and he brushed Yuki's hair without complaining while apologizing for deciding to support Alya for student council president. However, Yuki didn't mind and actually liked thinking she would experience a classic sibling rivalry just like in books and movies. Still feeling guilty, the boy told her he hadn't stopped liking her because of that, and Yuki had no doubts about it. In any case, they were now rivals, but Yuki made it clear she was willing to forgive the betrayal and was available to receive her brother's support if he changed his mind about Alya. Kyu's felt uncomfortable seeing his sister refer to it as a betrayal, but assured her he wouldn't abandon his Russian friend. On the other hand, Yuki was sure the guy would change his mind at some point. With that, she said goodbye to her brother, and outside his room lamented not being the one to motivate him, but showed that she didn't care as much as she pretended in front of him. However, she didn't like losing. When morning came, Kyu's woke up with a doubt, wondering if he had hurt his sister in yesterday's conversation. Considering that Yuki was emotionally unstable, the boy intended to make it up to his sister for not supporting her for student council president. However, she seemed fine pulling a prank on him despite getting stuck under the bed while doing so. But instead of pulling her out, Kyu's decided to smother her and end her life once and for all. Later, Alya is deep in thought, showing some anticipation for the arrival of the boy she likes. When a man enters the room, she gets startled thinking it was Kyu's. She tries to stay calm and act normal, and even gets another scare when the guy actually arrives, but quickly pretends to be unbothered to hide her feelings. Despite her efforts, it's becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the glow she sees around him. When Kyu's sits at the table and chats with his his friends, displaying a very different mood than usual. The Russian girl wonders why he didn't arrive yawning like always. Somehow she feels he's adjusting his behavior to be around her, just as he said he would yesterday. In the meantime, as she was idle in the middle of a volleyball game, a teammate calls Alya's attention to the ball coming her way. Alya jumps up to spike it, scoring the winning point. Later in the boys' game, Q's isn't so lucky, getting hit in the back of the head by a ball during his team's serve. Nursing a bump on his head, the poor guy tries to recover while his stomach growls with hunger. Alya approaches to check on him, and he assures her it's nothing serious. For some reason, Alya places her hand on her own forehead and then on Q's, giving him a prime view of the mountainous regions of the landscape. In that moment, he recalls his sister's strange talk about this and swallows hard with bitterness. Then Alya ties her hair up, revealing the edge of her armpit, driving the student even crazier. Just as he told his sister, the true master peaks only briefly. Alya asks why he's acting this way, and he pretends it's nothing. Soon she stands up and suggests he drinks some water, which he does, accompanied by Alya. Just like the Russian girl, the Japanese boy is finding it hard to stop staring at his friend, trying his best to hide his real feelings by almost diving into the water. Amidst all this, Masha arrives to chat with a guy who's now staring at the clouds. On the outside, he talks about the blue sky and everything around it, but inside all he can think about is how much he's come to like gym uniforms after today. Masha asks if he has a towel to dry off from the water fountain, but the guy is old school and prefers to let the sun do the job. Without wanting to know, Masha pulls Q's head down and starts rubbing it with her towel, ensuring a privileged view of the brighter side of life. He thanks her and says he now knows how a dog feels after a bath, to which Masha responds that she's always had a special fondness for dogs. Jealous Alya pulls her friend back to the classroom and asks Masha to do the same. On the way back to the classroom, Q's was already wondering where this was going and closes his eyes when Alya speaks to him, expecting a scolding. However, the Russian girl was asking if he was feeling better. Showing the same kindness as yesterday, Alya seemed to be entering her affectionate mode according to Q's. Curious about this, he asks if Alya isn't being too nice, and she replies that she's worried because he's been acting strange all day. Q's was about to say he's fine, but his stomach growls loudly again, making Alya think he didn't sleep in class only because he was too hungry. Q's explains that it was actually because he had a good night's sleep, which makes the Russian girl furious because she could hardly sleep last night, thinking about what he said while he slept like a log. Annoyed, she walks away, and Q's recognizes his friend because that's the Alya he knows. At the end of the day, he asks Alya to stop by the student council room, but she's too angry to respond. Still, she follows the path he wanted, so he silently follows behind. In one of the hallways, the soccer and baseball players were acting like army recruits in front of the council room. Not understanding anything, Q's opens the door and comes face to face with Sarashina Chisaki, who was carrying a bamboo katana on her shoulder. He was about to close the door after claiming he knocked on the wrong room, but the girl stops him. She then returns to her normal behavior and explains that she was just angry because she thought it was the soccer and baseball guys coming back. Sarashina is furious because she sent a junior student to mediate the conflict between the teams, but from what she heard, they all ignored her and kept fighting like a bunch of fools. For this reason, the senior student literally used the bamboo on some of them. Q's thinks it's excessive to carry a sword, but the girl is sure that a bamboo strike won't kill anyone. As soon as she says this, she starts laughing, and Q's forces a laugh to not make the situation worse, but he knows Sarashina well, and that some boys even call her Big Sis because of this behavior. Kanzaki intervenes to ease the tension, explaining that his girlfriend didn't hurt anyone, but just threatened them if they didn't agree to behave civilly. Irritated by being exposed, Sarashina slaps the boy who thought his shoulder would get dislocated. At this moment, Masha arrives at the meeting and asks the couple not to fool around in the council room. Embarrassed, Sarashina apologizes to her boyfriend, but he responds that it was good to take those slaps because they relieved some of the pain he was feeling. Still feeling guilty, the girl claims she can't control her strength, so Kanzaki promises to prepare to become a punching bag if that's what it takes to be by his beloved's side. With that said, Sarashina pulls the man closer to her, making Q's wonder how on earth this turned into a romantic scene. Alya joins in the fun and they both laugh at what's happening. Then Masha comes closer and comments that the two really get along, making Alya blush. Now it's Yuki's turn to arrive late. With that, the student council meeting finally begins. First of all, the president asks the newest member to introduce himself, so he says his name and mentions that he will be running for the presidential election alongside Alisa Kujo. Beyond his name, he claims to be a big consumer of otaku media and is willing to talk about it if anyone wants to get to know him better. That said, the president announces that the young man is officially part of the council members. As his first task, the newbie is assigned to help the older Kujo sister Masha. Finally, Kanzaki assures that Q's will quickly adapt to the new job thanks to his experience as vice president, but in any case, it would be interesting to get back on track working with the girls. By the way, there are not enough people to meet all the council's service demands, so it's a good time for the newbie to show what he's made of. Yuki interrupts to say she's going to the art club to discuss their next exhibition, and since one of the topics will surely be the project budget, she'd like to take Alya, who is the organization's treasurer. Alya accepts the proposal, and the president gives the green light. Soon the two set off alone for work, and Q's is sure some trouble is going to happen. No wonder Alya feels the same way, and while heading to the job, she can't resist and calls Yuki for a chat. Yuki agrees, but asks that it be in an empty classroom nearby. Inside, the Russian girl once again states her intention to run for president alongside Q's. Not as an apology or anything, since she doesn't think she's doing anything wrong, but she still believes she should say it personally to Yuki. Yuki agrees there's no reason to apologize, especially since Q's himself chose this path. Whether true or not, the boy's sister says she has nothing to say about it, much less wants to vent any frustration on her colleague, but she confesses she felt bad for not being the one he chose for the election. But Yuki goes further by saying she loves the boy, which leaves the Russian girl stunned. To make matters worse, she emphasizes that she loves him more than her own parents and provokes her colleague, asking if she loves him too. Alya is more economical with words, responding that Q's is just a friend, but Yuki presses to know if the girl is in love with her brother. Without holding back, she pushes Alya until she gets what she wants. Literally pushing the girl against the wall, Yuki manages to hear from Alya that she doesn't know if she's in love or not. After a brief pause to gather courage, the Russian girl confesses that she won't let Yuki have him, so the sister closes her eyes with some disdain and is happy to have gotten that response today. With that said, she calls her council colleague to accompany her to the art club, and taking advantage of being alone since she heard Q's and Masha calling the Russian girl by her nickname, Yuki decides to do the same, and in return she also asks to be called by her first name. With that, whether they liked it or not, Yuki, Suo, and Alisa Kujo had a deal. Meanwhile, Masha and Q's work together, and the boy notices that the girl knows exactly what she's doing when it comes to showing results. On the other hand, the president's girlfriend is an absolute disaster, clumsy to the extreme. Kanzaki sees that things are not looking good and tells Chisaki that there's a big restocking going on in the library and they need help to finish it, so he sends her there. Eager to show her worth, she rushes towards her destination while Kanzaki shows his impatience with his beloved's blunders. Once she's gone, he feels obliged to explain why his girlfriend is like that. According to him, Chisaki has always been this clumsy, but even so, she is a force to be reckoned with in club and committee discussions, according to the president. To avoid embarrassment, Q's comments that the council member has her strengths and weaknesses certainly. With the president's departure, Masha suggests they take a break for tea, and the girl had everything needed to make a great drink like milk, sugar, and even strawberry jam. Q's remembers that this jam is also used in Russian tea, so he wants a cup. Anyway, he thought black tea was more common for Russians in winter, but the girl explains that it depends a lot on the family. Hers, for example, like to drink it all year round, rain or shine, because they got the habit from their mother, who is fascinated by this type of drink. Q's asked because he has a fondness for Russia, even though he doesn't know much about the country. According to him, when he was a kid, he watched some movies from there with his grandfather, which sparked his interest. Besides that, the boy has a lot more to do with Russia, but he doesn't want want to talk much about that part. Actually, he studied like crazy to learn as much of the language as possible to be able to speak with the girl he loved in his childhood. Anyway, the Russian tea is on the table and Q's falls in love with the flavor. Looking closely at his cup, he ends up remembering that his mother was also a big fan of the drink while watching Masha eat the jam separately from the tea. Curious, he asks why, and she says it's just a personal preference. Following her lead, the boy takes a spoonful of strawberry jam but finds it too sweet. At that moment, Alya and Yuki arrive after finishing their task. Masha offers tea, which Yuki accepts immediately. Alya, on the other hand, is in a much less enthusiastic mood, so to speak, because she went through a tough time at the hands of her best friend's sister. Seeing that the Russian girl sat too close to him for no reason, Q's asks what happened, and she explains that in her country sitting too much at the corner of the table is considered bad luck. Not that she had much luck today, at least so far. Anyway, the girl sits so close that she pushes Q's to the other side, while Yuki gives a jealous, crazy look at her council colleague. The Russian girl, of course, doesn't hold back, so Q's realizes he's in the middle of a battle. To ease the tension, he asks Masha if it's true about sitting at the corner of the table, and she confirms, adding that single people who sit at the corner will never marry according to local culture. The older sister asks if the younger one has found someone to marry. Alya then pretends that she just didn't want to sit on the edge. Switching to her native language, she lets slip that it's too early to think about marriage. Q silently agrees since they are only 15 years old. Soon Masha serves her sister with a plate filled with jelly before the tea. Later, Kanzaki announces that the work for the day is done, and since the second-year students still need to discuss something with the teachers, the freshmen can go home. Walking home alongside Alya, Q senses his sister did something wrong as the Russian girl seems irritated. Passing by royal fast, he invites his friend inside to talk about her candidacy for president. Despite agreeing readily, she mutters in Russian, upset that this isn't a date. Clutching his chest, the Japanese boy is surprised to learn that's what his friend wanted. Inside the diner, Q asks why she looks so annoyed. She claims to be just tired, but soon asks if he's dating Yuki. Q seriously responds that he's not, and takes the opportunity to advise Alya. In truth, Yuki is just having fun with the Russian to see her reactions. Putting that aside, he brings up the candidacy issue, making it clear that at this rate, they won't be able to beat Yuki, who is very popular. Remembering when he ran against his sister years ago in another school, there were 6 competing tickets, unlike the 3 in his current school. In that election, out of the 12 people who entered, half dropped out of the Children's Congress a bit before the election. The Congress is a kind of debate contest held by the students, like if the school's baseball and soccer teams couldn't agree and had to debate in the Congress to decide. When this Congress presents presidential candidates, it becomes a preview of the election, and once they debate their policies and one side wins, the winner usually becomes the favorite for the student council race. Anyway, this race gets filtered down until only a few candidates for the student council presidency remain, but when Yuki began to stand out, everyone dropped out of the race against her. While Q's was explaining all this, Alya was biting her straw in anger and tension, and only realized it much later. Since she seemed more focused on her homeland than this conversation, he asked if she was listening, and Alya pretended she was just fascinated by the ice cream and got distracted. In reality, she was furious about how her friend was acting, giving so much credit to the brash Yuki and practically declaring her the president in advance. Not wanting to look bad, Alya insisted on the ice cream business and offered some to her council colleague. He preferred to get a new spoon, but Alya didn't want to bother another waiter with such a trifle. Practically shoving the spoon into the boy's mouth, she insisted that this was very common in Russia. As soon as Q's tasted the sweet from the spoon that had been in Alya's mouth, he knew this was a classic case of an indirect kiss. Everyone around looked on with expressions of shock and excitement at this unique scene until Q saw Taniyama passing by but said nothing about it. Returning to the election topic, he mentioned that to defeat Yuki, they would need a campaign that attracted students to his side, using Kanzaki's candidacy as an example. Kanzaki had been elected despite running against a former president from an elementary school. His strategy was that the journalism club published articles mocking and belittling him, thinking he was still the chubby bullied kid from school. However, people saw his significant transformation along with his grades. Seeing this as a case of overcoming adversity, people began to support him for the presidency, so Alya having such a story would be beneficial. With that said, the two turned to the table and started wondering what to do with the spoon that had the indirect kiss, until Q's confessed that the situation made him a bit nervous. Alya teased her friend, thinking he was better with girls. He asked if this was really common in Russia, and she replied in her native language that she would only do this with him. Q's was starting to anticipate such responses, so he didn't freak out this time. Returning to the presidency topic, he said they needed to build a great opening speech for the student body to start laying out the strategy they had discussed. Although Alya wasn't sure exactly what to say, Q's advised that the key was to be spontaneous and not hide anything from the people, as this creates real identification. After all, he found the Russian girl captivating just the way she was. With that, she replied in Russian that she wanted more compliments and would love to know in detail what he meant by that. Setting that aside, a spicy dish Q's ordered was served at the table. When he offered some, the girl was terrified of embarrassing herself in front of the boy she liked, but wanted to be the good sport and accepted a spoonful. While the angel and devil in the boy's mind debated whether to do it or not, Q's apologized for what he was about to do and ended up giving her some, also tense. In the small bowl he separated, there was simply an entire chili pepper, which Alya put entirely in her mouth and chewed. Naturally, the reaction wasn't great, to the point of calling her friend an idiot in Russian. On the way home, the poor girl was still all spicy but pretended to be okay. But what burned inside her most was the desire to beat Yuki in the election. Regarding this, she wanted to know who her rival would choose as vice president, but Q's thought it didn't matter much. However, as it would have to be someone who had been on the council, maybe she would choose Taniyama, which would be bad news since that girl went to the end in the elementary school election and won alongside Yuki at the time. Speaking of which, Q's remembered that Taniyama gave up becoming president that year. The next day, speaking of this, Yuki introduced Kimishima Ayano from class 1C to the council. Ayano stated that she would take care of general council matters alongside Q's Masachika, so Q's glared at his sister, knowing she was certainly planning something. If you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to hit that like button. Your support helps motivate me to keep bringing you each episode. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next episode.